people on social media are just, diagnosing everybody with trauma. And so I think it's helpful. I think it's helpful to look at how people have a trauma response to an experience or a series of experiences in their lives as an example of how the body works, and that it's a spectrum, right?
Phil for you.
So on one end of the spectrum would be post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD.
Okay.
And then it's a continuum where people are going to be affected by adverse experiences or so forth, but maybe not to the extreme where it's diagnosable as PTSD, but that it still may be coming up and interfering with a person's well-being, their health, their physical health, their emotional health, their relational well-being, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think it's helpful to start with an example of PTSD.
Because it's the extreme.
Because it's kind of the extreme. So you think about when we think about trauma, most people think about war, tsunami, a rape, violent rape, a bad car accident, and that kind of stuff. And that we call that a big T trauma.
That's big T.
And you probably know a lot of this, but I'm just saying it out loud.
No, well, they might not. And this is for everybody.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so if we look at maybe a combat veteran who is walking down the street and just talking with somebody, and they're just living, doing their day, and all of a sudden there's a really loud bang, okay? And all of a sudden that person jumps under the car.
Yes.
And in their body, they are feeling everything that they felt at the moment when they were in combat.
Yes.
Okay? So trauma has no it has no time. Right?
Yeah,
okay.
This is from can we digress for one moment?
Yes.
This reminds me of the studies they did with, what was his name, Little Albert?
Yeah.
Where the little baby or the small child, this poor kiddo, they would bring into a room, and every time they'd show him a white bunny, they would scare the living dog out of him. They would just scare the heck out of this little kid. This poor kid, wherever you are, Albert.
Yeah.
Goodness, we did you an injustice.
Yeah.
But from that, we learned that traumatic experiences have no time.
Yeah.
They really don't have fidelity.
Yeah.
They don't have definition. So it wasn't just bunnies.
Yeah.
It could be a certain time of day, but not structured to that time, any time in his life.
Right. There's a particular cue.
The building they saw, or just like fluffy texture of soft,
right, exactly.
white.
Yes.
That's why when you see a car that's like your ex-girlfriend's or your ex-boyfriend's,
and your heart starts
just because it's the same kind of car.
Right.
You don't know that that's her or his car.
Yeah. Yes. It's a cue. It's a sensory cue. And so it might be visually, like you see the car. It might be tactile. You mentioned the fluffy. The child might just feel something fluffy, and that's enough cue to bring back the distress response. It could be olfactory smell.
It could be a smell. It's just all of our senses. We have
It could be the weather. It could be the season. If you had a traumatic experience in the spring, so then when the flowers start to bloom and you hear the birds, you can start to be filled with old feelings, old emotions. Maybe there was a breakup at that time, and so then there's deeper sadness. But so going back to this combat vet, who all of a sudden is in a state of intense fight or flight,
right?
Okay, survival. This person is acting and feeling as if their life is in danger. Alrighty, so what happens with trauma is that in the moment of the incident, when the person was actually in combat and they were in a fight or flight state appropriately because they needed to protect themselves or attack, their life was in danger, then certain bodily functions slow down or stop working, ones that are unnecessary. For example, digestion. You don't need to digest food right then, right?
Right.
The blood flow kind of leaves a lot of the organs and goes to the extremities so that you can run faster, that you can hit, or that sort of thing. One thing that tends to not work is the pathway to the hippocampus in the brain. And the hippocampus is where explicit memory is stored. Okay. And so in our normal life, when we're calm and we're relaxed and we have experiences, we go on a camping trip with our family or our friends, and then afterwards we can tell about it to somebody and, oh, we did this and we camped here and we made s'mores and it got stored into your explicit memory. And then you can talk about it in a verbal way as a series of events or whatever. Okay. When you're in intense fight or flight, that pathway kind of shuts down, isn't working.
Yeah.
And so the experience, rather than getting stored in the hippocampus in explicit memory in a way that it becomes, something you can talk about, and it gets stored in an older part of the brain, more primitive part, and is experienced as sensation. Okay? And so that's why, the person can't really talk maybe about what's happening, but they're feeling exactly the same body sensations. Okay. Yeah. Think about that for animals, or when we're more primitive, right? You learned, you saw a family member get eaten by a wild bear. Okay. So you were in fight or flight at that time. So you learned from that experience that if you see something that looks like a bear, or you hear the sound of a bear if you live in the woods, you're going to have that experience again. So this is a normal bodily process that humans were designed to have for survival, okay? The problem is that most of us are not in danger most of the time, but we have a lot of stressors that cause us to get into fight or flight all the time. Okay, so going back to what's happening in the body. All right.
Shutting down certain things.
So that's an extreme example, okay, of the combat vet. Let's go to somebody who, maybe had what we call small t trauma, which is more the kind of trauma I tend to work with, which is more developmental trauma. And by the way, a situation that could potentially be traumatic or experienced as a trauma for one person isn't necessarily going to be experienced as trauma.
Right.
So we know that there are some soldiers who will develop PTSD from their combat, and they may have someone who had a similar experience in combat not develop PTSD, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of it can be genetic predisposition. It can be resilience. It can be if there have been previous experiences of trauma. So there's a lot of other conditions that will determine whether somebody experiences a distressing event as trauma and then develops PTSD or not. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
So everybody is somewhere on this continuum, because this response of, being in a heightened state in danger is the way we're designed. All righty. So the kind of trauma that I work with, the more extreme forms could be diagnosed as PTSD, right? I mean, we could consider PTSD, and other times we wouldn't. We might call it small t trauma, or maybe just a distress response.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to give an example. So there's a couple, and they seem happily together and get along, and life seems okay and pretty decent. But certain things come up sometimes. One is that, let's say, this person's partner, let's say it's a gay couple, and so it's John and Bill, okay? And Bill texts John, and he doesn't hear a response. And John is usually very responsive. Okay, John normally responds very quickly to Bill's text. And a half hour has passed, and John hasn't responded to Bill's text. And Bill starts to feel this tightness in his chest, and his face is getting hot, and he can't breathe very well. And he's starts pacing the house and checking his phone compulsively, repeatedly every few seconds, right? And then is muttering out loud to himself and actually getting really angry at John and coming up with all these stories about what's
what
happening,
John's
and
doing, or
and right,
and
is
how
John,
he feels about him.
yes, and
Ugh.
and maybe crying at some point or whatever. And so then John comes home, and Bill is such in a heightened distress state that he just like jumps on him and, where have you been? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And John is
John
like,
has no idea about any of this
John
stuff.
is like, oh my God, I had no idea my battery was out.
Phone died or
my
something.
phone died and I didn't
Yep.
even realize it. I'm so sorry, Okay. So that is a more kind of
God.
real life experience. And that's just one of all sorts of different responses people can have. Maybe you make a bid to your partner to use Gottman language, like,
Yeah.
oh, look at that squirrel out the window, and the partner doesn't respond for whatever reasons.
Yeah, they turn
and that's kind of
it or against
right.
it.
And it ties into experiences this person had from childhood where they didn't get responded to, and their old beliefs come up, right, from their that internal working model, or the map of the mind we described about, that decide all these beliefs.
Heck yeah.
And so going back to the example with John and Bill, we can guess that Bill had some abandonment experiences as a child. Maybe the parents divorced and one of the parents moved far away, or a parent died, or maybe just a parent was, never picked them up on time from school and they were sitting there alone, or, something. So pretty much any time the emotional response is bigger than what would elicit from the majority of people, or people who don't have maybe this, same past, then that's a sign it's the past coming up in the present. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's the same phenomenon physiologically that happens with the war vet. Are we going to call this PTSD? Maybe not. Do we call it trauma?
It's a similar flavor of it.